Welcome back to the southwest of England in a series that I hope will exhibit some of the best adventures that this pocket of England has to offer. If you're new around here, I'm Caroline, and in the last few episodes I've enjoyed delicious veg-centric food on an organic Devon farm, explored some of the area's heritage at Castle Drogo and its close neighbour Finch Foundry. I've hiked through the magnificent Lydford Gorge and showcased the rustic apple wagon shepherd's hut that we rented for the long weekend. Today we'll be crossing the border into Cornwall, where the adrenaline and excitement levels get ramped up as I choose to throw myself off multiple sea cliffs and spend the afternoon exploring the nearby beach. If during the video you find yourself enjoying it, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel so that you can join me in my Devon and Cornwall adventures. Due to the nature of the coasteering having been a group tour, and also we were battling with the poor sound quality that came about from the GoPro footage, I've decided to do this video a little bit differently to my other ones, and instead I'm going to be giving you guys a running commentary. Shortly after leaving the car park at Praa Sands, we started walking along the southwest coastal path. We were having to battle through some of the plants, and then we took a sharp left after having climbed up quite some height and started heading towards the sea cliffs, and this shot gives quite a good idea as to how big the group size was. This next clip, it was quite perilous at this point. It was a really good job that they had the rope, and I was clinging onto that for dear life, and I was still sliding a little bit as I was going down, and it wasn't actually that much lower down from this point where we were then expected to jump into the water. Unfortunately, I wasn't expecting it. I genuinely thought that they would have eased us in nicely, taken us much closer to the water, and we would have jumped in from a much lower height, but it did then mean that the confidence had been built up a little bit more going into further jumps as we went around on the tour. The area that we did this tour in was stunning, just amazing sea stacks and arches. At the very beginning we did get a little bit of blue sky, which was a bit of a bonus. So that we weren't just jumping off the same sea cliffs over and over again. We had to swim through open water, through little canyons like what you can see here, and then that would take us on to other parts of the rocky coastal cliff. I think this one that we're at the moment was the second decent sized jump that we were doing, and I think this is me just sort of holding back a little bit, waiting for other people. And what was quite nice about this rock was that it was quite big, so it meant that a few people could be jumping off it at given times, and some of the really eager ones, maybe people who'd done coasteering before, I think jumped off of this one a few times, swam back around, came back up, jumped off again. Meanwhile, someone like me who was just doing coasteering for the very first time, I think was just being a little bit more cautious in these early stages. Eventually, after standing by and watching lots of other people jumping off, I plucked up the courage and I made the leap, and we had to clamber back up. As you can see here, the entrance from the actual water up onto the sea rocks in some areas was really quite good and easy, almost like steps built into the rock. But unfortunately, because I'd been so much of a scaredy cat, we had to then jump off on the other side of this rock to allow for us to keep on going to discover other areas to be able to do the coasteering from. We were very much at the back of the group the whole time. It had started out because I had put my wetsuit on the wrong way around. I'd really struggled to get into the legs of it, and then eventually some ladies who were also doing the tour, they said, I'm going to stop you now and I'm going to let you know the zip's supposed to be at the back. So I'd had to take the entire wetsuit off, which if you've ever tried to put one on before or take one off before, it's very exhausting. And so I was the last one. We were like running up the coastal path to try and catch up with the rest of the group. But actually, because it was our first time coasteering, I think it worked quite well because we were able to then watch the rest of the group and have a look at where they were jumping from and then where they were then swimming onto, and it just gave me, I guess, a little bit more confidence with what I was needing to do, because I wasn't that person going first and needing to lead, so I was quite happy being at the back in the end. I can see at this part that the weather was really starting to cloud over and wasn't looking quite as nice as what it was at the beginning of the day, and this is just a really small sea stack sticking out. But what made this quite technical was that it was quite shallow. You can't really see the rock, but there's an instructor there, and hats off to the guy. His job at that point was just to stand there going, jump at this point here, and every single paying member of the public who took part in this pretty much jumped right in his face, soaking him on every single jump. But it was because if you didn't quite get it right at that point, there was the danger that you could hit some of the rocks in those shallow places. And this was also where the guide was yelling to me, he was like, you can't stay in the water, you need to come up. But I just really wanted to get some footage of someone jumping off of that. The stuff that looks like gold on the rock, they were barnacles, and they were brutal. They were incredibly sharp, and I managed to cut both my knuckles on my hands. I think this is a clip of what it looks like after about a week. And I also managed to clip my ankle on the side of some of the barnacles as well. I was let off lightly, but there was one girl in the group and she was bleeding a lot from some of the cuts and scrapes that she got off of those things. Didn't realise how brutal they were. And then bit by bit, the jumps that they were getting us to do became just that little bit more technically challenging. This one, instead of being a sheer straight drop down, it was quite diagonal. So it meant that when jumping, I was going to have to properly lunge to make sure that I didn't hit the cliff on the way down. And the adrenaline and I suppose the level of being scared really did start to pick up as you went on. But obviously with every single successful jump, you had that sense of achievement and really made you want to keep on jumping and not say no to any of them, despite the fact that they were getting scarier as we went along. And it was from this rock where we started to do some of the much bigger jumps, and we can see here the instructor climbed up really quite high, and I guess was just giving us a little bit of entertainment from jumping at that height. It certainly wasn't anything that any of the paying customers decided to do. And I was so proud of myself at this point, because a lot of people in the group opted out of doing this jump, and you can see how perilous it is, having to be really, really careful going out. And I appreciate, I am going to jump off of it, but there's a difference between jumping off in a controlled way and slipping and falling. And then one of the instructors really kindly said, if you want, I can jump off with the camera and I can take some footage of you from the water level. So he jumped off, and I think he's had plenty of practice jumping with the GoPro, because he got a much better shot than any of the ones that I've managed to get. And I think I'd just gotten a little bit overconfident, because it was the second time I was then doing this jump, and we were taught right at the very beginning, when you're jumping, when you're falling, put your arms out, because it helps to give you that little bit of stability and balance. But don't keep your arms out when you're about to hit the water, cross them over, because otherwise it feels like you're slapping the water. And I just had a mind blank, and I crossed my arms when I was falling, and then just as I was about to hit the water, I put my hands out, and oh, it hurt so much. And obviously you're in that group sort of context and you're putting on a brave face and you're like, I'm okay, I'll pretend like nothing just happened. And I think the other customers probably had no idea what had happened, but I'm almost certain all of the guides were like, yeah, she messed up there, her hand's gonna be hurting. Once we'd done those slightly daredevil dives or jumps off of the cliff, we were then told, right, we're going to start swimming through this cave, archway, canyon. I'm not really too sure. And those are the instructors up there on the rocks. And I'll be completely honest, I did not swim at all throughout this. The tide was just pushing me through, taking me through. And you can see it just bobbing up and down. It was really quite extreme, but it was also quite, I guess, relaxing, because you weren't having to exert much in the way of effort, and it was certainly an activity that could, I think, rival most gym workouts. You think, oh, you're just falling, you're just throwing yourself off of cliffs. Falling doesn't take much effort, but you forget all of the swimming and the climbing out. It's actually really exhausting. So this was quite nice, just lying on my front and letting the tide take me on through. And then these were some more canyons with archways that we got to, again, I say swim, float, let the tide just pull you on through. But it was just spectacular scenery that I think, had I not had that life vest and the guides with me, I never would have dared go into these sorts of areas on my own. Spectacular. And this is a lovely and embarrassing clip just demonstrating how difficult it could sometimes be trying to get out of the water. As you think you're good to go, you're good to start walking, but of course as the waves go up, you then suddenly lose your balance, and yeah, not exactly the best luck for me, but I'm managing. Now, being at the back at this point, we could definitely sense that there was a bit of a delay and a hold up, and at one point one of the guides said, we can't keep staying all day. If you don't want to jump, just walk down a little bit lower and go from an easier place. So that straight away set in, oh my goodness, this is going to be quite a scary one. And a scary one it turned out to be. So the issue with this was that the rock wasn't fully vertical, which you might just be able to see. So you were needing to really lunge and push yourself out just that little bit more horizontally before you allowed yourself to drop down. But as you can see, you've got a very sheer cliff face on the other side of this little stretch of water. So it was trying to calculate how much of a push outwards do I need to give myself so that I don't fall into the rock that I'm currently stood on. But at the same time, how much do I not need to push myself so much so that I don't hit the rocks on the other side of the water? And I think it really was one of those mind over matter type of situations, and you can see how long it's really taking me to gear myself up for this. And that was the last guide up there, and she was really lovely, and she was being patient. I think in comparison to some of the other people, I didn't take too long to jump off. And constantly throughout the whole thing, you know, after every single jump, I would always get a good job or well done, and it was quite a nice confidence boost, if anything. I'm sure probably not all of my jumps were really that great, but they knew what to say to make sure that we had that confidence boost to keep on going. And then, if memory serves me correct, I think this was the final jump. So it wasn't actually the most difficult of jumps, but it was probably the most spectacular place that we jumped from. And as you can see, once we jumped, we then had to climb out on the other side and go through that sea arch. And just the colour of the water, spectacular. And then the last section of this tour took us through the sea cave, which I believe is full of water when it's high tide. And then we had to duck out, and that pretty much took us back to the very rocky end of the Praa Sands beach to then finish up the tour. After the coasteering, we popped along to the Sandbar Cafe, which had beautiful views overlooking the beach. I was quite taken by their soup of the day, which was the leek and potato, but I have to confess that when it turned up, it was the most interesting leek and potato soup that I've ever come across. It tasted a little bit more like a minestrone. After we'd warmed up a little bit in the cafe and had some hot food to eat, we took a wander along Praa Sands beach. We were able to watch on as people were swimming in the sea, having a go at either surfing, bodyboarding. There were also people kite surfing, and what was quite interesting is we got to see one guy coming out of the water after having finished kite surfing. And I never really thought about it before, but he was obviously having to still control the kite that was floating in the air, but also holding on to his board and making sure that that didn't escape from the waves. The RNLI passed us on their quad bikers. I think they were just going up and down and making sure that everyone was safe on the beach. And the houses, as beautiful as the view was overlooking that sea, they were perilously close as that land's been eroded away. We eventually ran out of sand on the beach, and it took us along to this very, very rocky area with plenty of rock pools. I did very briefly see a very small fish inside of one of the rock pools, but I think as soon as it sensed that I was there, it went and hid underneath some plant life, and it was the only bit of life that I really saw, which was a little bit of a shame. But the amount of shells that were stuck to the rocks, I'm so sure that these ones are mussels, because if I think about when I order mussels in a restaurant, they come to me looking not too dissimilar to this. That was crazy just to see like tens of thousands of them stuck to all of these rocks, and there were plenty of other ones as well, but the other ones, I have no idea what they were. If you do know, please let me know in the comments below. It was quite interesting just wandering around and seeing if we could see anything. And then eventually, just feeling a little bit tuckered out from the day, we headed back to the car next to the cafe.